In the beginning, God created. Then he created man in his own image. Then man created. Those who know him then are creative Christians.
Let's meet one of them now.
Today we're going to talk to Shun Lee Fong. Shun Lee is president and creative director of the Greenhouse Arts and Media and sits on the board of directors there. He's an actor, writer, musician, and the CEO and creative principal of Genuine Productions, LLC. Their focus is on films, new media, and publishing. He graduated summa cum laude from Creighton University with a degree in journalism and mass communications. After obtaining a Juris Doctorate at the University of Iowa, he practiced law for 5 years in Nebraska and Iowa, focusing on civil litigation, corporate transactions, intellectual property, and media law. In 2003, however, he left his law practice to pursue professional acting, writing, and other creative opportunities. As a member of the Screen Actors Guild, he has performed extensively in film, theater, commercials, voiceovers, and print. He's often found on stage or in recording studios as a songwriter and a multi-instrumental musician. He has written a number of screenplays, articles, and other works like The Saints and the Poets, a series of essays on creativity and leadership. Also, he's an often requested speaker. He's taught mass media and entertainment law at 4 different prestigious universities, and for contrast, is a member of the producing team of the animated television series, The Dead Sea Squirrels, along with Mike Naraki of VeggieTales and Steve Taylor of Blue Like Jazz, and supervising animator Tom Bancroft of Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, Aladdin, and The Lion King. At Genuine, he's the executive producer of the feature film Sun Moon with Sun Moon Movie LLC, and the producer of the feature film Crosspoint. Shun Lee, it's a pleasure to have you here.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Where are you calling in from? Are you here in the LA area or?
No, I'm up in Tehachapi.
Okay.
Yeah, do you know where that is?
I don't, no.
Yeah, not many people do.
Okay.
We keep it a real big secret up here. We're about a little south of Mojave by about 16, 17 miles, something like that, and about 40 miles north of Bakersfield.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're in the mountains.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, actually, they were making movies back here. 1916, I think they made a couple of movies up here.
Back in the day, the early days.
Yeah, we have a big roots in Hollywood.
There you go.
Yeah. Are you? Hey, I was going to just ask you about this greenhouse arts and media. Why don't you take a moment and just tell me about that?
Oh boy, a moment. I got to fit all of that into a moment.
Well, make it a long moment.
Make it a long moment. Okay. Well, I won't bore you with too many of the details, but the greenhouse started back in 2007. So we're about 15 years old. We're a nonprofit, and the overarching goal is just to work with creative artists in all the different disciplines: film, television, music, photography, you name it, we've got them. So, we have lots and lots of Christians and non-Christians. It's for anybody. We've served roughly 10,000 people over the last 15 years from all over the world. We have a branch here in LA where we started, but we just opened up a chapter in Atlanta, and we're looking into Nashville, maybe Austin as well. And our goal is just to provide a healthy approach to the creative arts. Obviously, since we're Christians, that's going to be at the very heart of it. But sometimes we don't even tell people that. We're just like, hey, we just want a healthy place for artists. And a lot of non-Christians that may never darken the door of a church are going to come to something like this, just given the atmosphere.
Well, I saw that you have specific programs. The one that I'm most interested in is that Catalyst one,
Yeah.
for the writers. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
But do people bring projects to you that help them with, or
Yeah.
how do they work with you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that we provide to people, whether they're members or not, is some creative services, different creative services that are available, including just sitting down and going over their project and saying, okay, this is where you are. Let's come up with a strategy for what's next. How do we get you to the next step or the next several steps? If you know any artists, you know that they're not always the best at strategizing, which is, totally fine. That's why we all need each other. And so we have people here at the greenhouse who are willing to sit down and just say, okay, from a business perspective, this is where you need to go. Here's some legal issues that you need to watch out for. Here's a strategy for how to get it to the next level.
Um, you're a musician, as it says in your bio, a multi-instrumental musician, and you're also a writer, producer, director. Uh, do you concentrate on any one of those, or are you just available for anybody that happens to walk in that needs that help?
Yeah, in terms of like helping them with their projects, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of having had a very broad background in various art disciplines is that I have the ability to speak to them on a number of levels, and then having my background as a lawyer, I can pull that into the process as well. So yeah, I've sat down with, filmmakers, graphic designers. I've sat down with musicians and bands, and just the other day, I had somebody call me up and said, "Hey, we're trying to find the name of our band. We haven't figured that out, and what do we have to look out for from a trademark issue?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about that." So we have the ability to cross-pollinate the different disciplines in a pretty amazing way, and one that a lot of other organizations may not have the resources to do. And so that's we find a lot of joy and fulfillment in helping artists in the different disciplines.
Well, would you mind just kind of going through a little bit of your background, and particularly how you came to know the Lord, and
Yeah.
how you decided that this was where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very long, tortured story of how I
It's
got to where
okay.
I
I'm
am
a
now.
long, tortured kind of guy. So,
Yeah, well, I grew up in a family. Both my parents are believers,
praise
and
God.
very dedicated. Yeah, it's a real blessing for me, and I know people who have not had that, and that's a different approach to life in growing up. And so my parents introduced me to the Lord when I was very young. And so, in terms of me making my own personal decision, I was pretty young, 4 or 5 years old. I still
Really? No
remember where I
kidding.
was. I don't remember the exact age I was. So, and then growing up in the arts, my parents really encouraged getting involved in music and theater and writing, etc. So I've been doing that aspect since I was very young. It wasn't until I got into college that it really became my own. My faith became my own. When you're growing up in a Christian family, a lot of times it's kind of handed to you and you just kind of accept
Yeah.
it. Through my high school years, I kind of did my own version of rebellion and backsliding. I tell people what those things were, and they're like, "Yeah, you didn't really backslide." But I knew that at
You
that
want to
point,
hear backsliding? I'll tell you backsliding. Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that God had some work that He had to do in my heart, just like He does for everybody,
Oh, yeah.
And when I
He
got into
makes you
college,
his own.
that's
He
right.
really
Yeah.
does.
And he puts the choice in front of you. So that's not
Yeah.
just your parents' faith that you've just kind of glommed onto, but that you actually have to think through what it is that you have decided on, what you've chosen when you decide to follow Jesus. And so for me, it was really in college when I got into a college group. And from there, it was like, no, I'm in this for the long haul. And that I think all of us go through a season of life or several seasons of life where God kind of tests that and says, okay, this is what it means to follow Jesus. And
Yeah.
I went through that. And each time you go through that and you press through it, I feel like you come out stronger. And so yeah, since then I was a worship leader for many years, and have done that at a number of churches, conferences, etc., and have gotten to take what I've learned from worship leading and begin to apply that to the different arts disciplines. What does it mean to be a worshiper when you're a filmmaker? What does it mean to be a worshiper when you are doing photography, or when you are writing poetry, or whatever it is you're doing? All of those things. Worship is not just about the 4 or 5 songs that you do on a Sunday morning. It's a lifestyle, everything you do, and especially as artists, we have to learn how to do that.
Yeah. It's a continual heart thing. I
Yeah,
mean, the heart
absolutely.
has to be so engaged all the time as a Christian. And,
Absolutely.
that's not an easy thing to do, but it's certainly a goal.
Yeah,
You have to
absolutely.
look at what you're doing and really kind of get an idea of what God has in mind for you at this particular moment. It's,
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about a verse out of Ephesians 2. I think it's verse 10, where it
yeah,
says that we are the handiwork of God, created in Christ Jesus to do works, good works that he prepared in advance for us. And I've
that's
been thinking
right.
about that as an artist. It's like God has certain things, certain creative works that he's already prepared in advance for us to do. Our job is to find out what they are and then go do them. And there's a certain level of grace that's there in that process. That makes it very exciting, and gives us the opportunity to view our artistic and creative works as co-creation. It's not just us slogging through this difficult thing. We're actually getting the opportunity to work hand in hand with God as we create these things that he prepared in advance for us.
Oh, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
It's that sense of belonging to something that's so much greater. And it's all about, for me, it's about going through open doors. Do
Yeah.
you find that true in what you're
Yeah,
doing?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think probably 75% of the time that's true. Where there's a door and you're like, oh, that's an interesting door, and that I couldn't have opened that on my own. The other 25% of the time, I think sometimes God says, I want you to go through that door that is closed right now, and he gives you the opportunity to press forward. Sometimes as artists, we only take the easy road. And I think God sometimes says, no, I'm going to give you something very difficult to do. And I want you to do it out of obedience. And I'm going to have the grace that you need in that process. But uh, sometimes it's just about, pressing forward and doing that thing that's difficult. And on the other end of it, you look back and you're like, oh, well, God was there the entire time. He was
Yeah.
just strengthening me through the process of doing something hard.
Yeah, it gives you the faith to put your hand on the knob and try it.
Yeah.
And you always learn something from that.
Yeah. If you're open to
You
it.
really do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, can you think of any times in your, you came out here in 2003, gave up the exciting world of corporate law. I could feel the sacrifice that you made in giving up that life. But
Yeah.
my daughter, believe it or not, is, what is she, 55 now,
Okay.
56? She's in law school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, she was uh, what are they, a paralegal for
Okay.
so many years, and just decided she wanted to be a lawyer, and so she's in her second year right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The
And
year they
she's
work you
doing
to death.
corporate law, so
Yeah.
you know, Anyway, you gave
Yeah.
that up and in 2003. So this is, almost 20 years now that you've
Yeah.
been working in Hollywood, which, um, is no easy task by any means.
Right.
Were there times when you just felt like God was having you beat your head against a wall for no reason at all?
Yeah, I mean, even before I came out to LA, I was feeling that way. Here I am. I'm making a nice paycheck every other week, and you have the kind of the respect of your peers and the people around you, because you have something that is considered acceptable to polite society. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you feel like God's calling you to do something. Wait, you want me to go be an actor? And that makes very little sense. And I remember, God had really called me to this. I had felt like he was really speaking to me. And I don't say that lightly. I know that gets tossed around, but I really felt
No,
like
it's
God was
not.
like, I want you to go, and I want you to go to LA, and the entertainment industry is going to be your mission field. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I grew up in a missions oriented church, but it was always about, you go to China or you go to India, you go to wherever, and instead to say, no, artists are the people that you're going to minister to. And suddenly all the things that you've built up, this little kingdom that you've built up as a lawyer, is in jeopardy. And while there was a tremendous amount of excitement that I was going to get to go do this because my heart was just racing for it, at the same time, there was a certain amount of fear that went with it too. You mean I have to give up that paycheck, and I have to give up the respect of peers and the people around me, and I have to do this thing that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to people. And I remember even going into my office, I had like after 2.5 years of contemplating this, I reached the point where God was like, it's time to make that decision. And I went into my office for a week. It was the last week where he had set a deadline for me. And I'd close the door to my office and I'd just sit there and be like, God, this is much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And I remember the very last day he said to me, look, you can say no. I still love you. I'll still bless you. You can say no, but if you say no, fear is going to rule your life. And that wasn't much of an option for me. And so I stood up and I went and turned my notice in, and there was a tremendous amount of grace and peace that flooded in when I just obeyed. When I just said, okay, you said do this, and here we go, and we're going to do it. And that doesn't mean that suddenly everything became easy. Actually, things became very difficult after that. But
I
when
would
you
imagine.
obey, yeah, when you obey, there's the grace comes with the obedience. And so to be able to just say, well, I'm here, Lord, you called me. I'm not going to look back. I even remember when I first got here to LA, I used to tell people like, well, if the acting thing doesn't work out, I can always go back and be a lawyer. And I remember I'd said it once, and God very gently spoke to me and said, you don't get to say that. When I call you to something, you don't get to keep something in your hip pocket. You don't get to keep your trump card. It's either all in or not. And I don't want you to say that anymore. And I'm like, okay, point taken. All right. I don't get to use my law career as my fallback position. I'm either in or I'm out. And at that point, it was just deciding I'm in. I'm not going to allow that to be in the back of my mind that I can always go back.
Well, going to Hollywood like you just did is kind of like going to a foreign country, without, I mean, you don't even have a chance to learn the language. And,
Yeah.
tell me about, say, the first 6 months of that. What was that like?
Oh, is tremendously exciting. Being a lawyer is creatively dry.
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling the outlet of creativity that, makes me personally come alive. Now, there are people who are lawyers. The first thing they think about when they get up in the morning is, I wonder what's happening in the law today. And they're just get all excited. For me, I'd get up in the morning. I'm like, how quickly can 5:30 get here so I can go home and do the creative stuff I want to do? I was
Yeah.
sneaking out of my firm at lunch to go do auditions, and just praying that the partners in my firm would never see anything I was in. And God answered that prayer. It was a miracle. It wasn't until a week after I moved out here that one of the partners called me up and said, "I just saw you in a commercial." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I did that.
Within
I
a
shot that
week, you were
several
doing a
weeks ago."
commercial?
Well, no,
Wow.
I had shot it a few months earlier, and it was just then that I guess God allowed the partners to see the stuff I had been doing. But
Wow.
when I got out to LA, it had been a series of steps of obedience where God was like, "I want you to do this." And I'd be like, "Well, it doesn't make any sense to do that. Why would I do that? I don't have all these other things." And God's like, "Look, you either obey me or you don't." The first one was like, this was back when I was still practicing law. "I want you to go get your actor's headshot." And I'd be like, "Why would I do that? I don't have an agent. I don't." Okay, I kept putting it off, kept putting it off. And then I start to get really kind of discouraged. Like, "God, I feel like you called me out to the creative world and yet nothing's happening." He's like, "I told you to go get your headshot and you haven't done that yet." And I remember I actually went and I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll go get the headshot," and found a photographer who didn't have any business shooting headshots, but I went and got it and got my headshot taken. And within the same week, just a few days later, that same photographer called me up and said, "Hey, I've got this agent that's calling me and she's looking for somebody who's half Asian to come and do a commercial. Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." But if I hadn't been obedient about the headshot, I never would have had that opportunity. And it was a real lesson for me that we're not called, especially as creatives, but in general, we're not called to be practical. We're called to be wise, and those are two different things. Our job is to be wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and learning to just be obedient and stop overthinking things in my head. And I carried that into the first 6 months of being an actor here. It is a very short leap between being a trial attorney and being an actor. I mean, you stand up in front of a bunch of people and you tell a story and you hope that they buy it, you hope that they buy it emotionally and logically. And so I had to learn that it's not about me figuring out the end result. My job is to just be obedient with the thing that God puts in front of me for that day, creatively, business, career, all that stuff that follows. And so I really had to learn some spiritual principles of what it means to follow Jesus, and where there are no uh, clear-cut formulas. There was, when you're in certain areas, you can, what it's like to follow Jesus in those areas. It's right there. People have done it before, and you just kind of follow what they've done. I didn't have that when I moved out here. Not that there aren't Christians out here, but I didn't have access to that. So I had to really learn some spiritual truths of what does it mean to follow Jesus when you're hacking your way through the jungle and there's no clear-cut path to follow.
Have you written all that down?
I have actually. A lot of that's written down. I wrote a book called The Saints and the Poets, which I believe you mentioned.
Yeah, I
And
was going to ask you about that.
yeah.
Is that filled with those kind of insights?
Well, thank you for calling it insight. For me, it was like insights that were hard won. They weren't easy but yeah, a lot of that is in there. That book was really written to be kind of a devotional for creatives. There's 52 essays in there, just to kind of challenge people as to what it means to be a creative and to be a believer at the same time. I'm still learning those things. I'm still learning what that means. I think that's the beauty of being a creative artist, that you never stop learning what that path looks like.
Well, part of that is the beauty of being a Christian, is because
Yeah.
we never, I mean, I can't imagine stopping learning about,
Yeah.
I've read the Bible. I go through the Bible about twice every year.
Oh, good.
And, I'm trying to do about 10 chapters a day is what I do. And,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, every time I read it, it's a brand new book. I
Yeah.
mean, it just,
Yeah.
and to ever think I could understand everything in there, or what God was doing,
Right.
or what his motivations are, or all of that. I mean, and then to couple that with this notion of just the Hollywood, which is just a micro, I mean, it's just a mass of different thoughts and different disciplines and everything else, all being drawn together to
Yes.
try to make one thing,
Yeah.
like a movie.
I say about the film industry in particular that it is the convergence of all the creative disciplines. Like everything converges into film. That's what I think draws me to film and television is like we have everything here. We have choreography, we have photography, we have um, painting and sculpture and all these different things. To me, that's very exciting.
And the written word and
Yeah,
and the interpretation of it, and
absolutely.
and the blending of lighting and color and all of that stuff
Yeah.
is just I'm amazed every time I see a movie that this thing actually came together. you
Yeah.
know and there are some lousy movies out there, but
Oh, sure.
they all came together. You know,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
when I was looking at your IMDb database, there are a lot of 5-minute films and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Uh, do you do them as part of your activity there at Greenhouse,
Yeah.
or what?
Yeah, we have a program called the Creative Lab. And the Creative Lab was started, about 5 years ago or so. A wonderful actress who's a friend of mine, and she and I got together and we started saying, well, one of the problems that artists have, and there are thousands of new artists here in LA alone
Oh yeah.
every year, and they're competing with the thousands that came the year before, and it's just a kind of a very um, chaotic, almost dog eat dog environment. And one of the things we noticed was that, you have these actors or writers that come here and they can't get an agent because the agent will say, well, come back to me when you have a credit to your name. Well, they can't get the credit until they get the job, and they can't get the job until they have the agent. And so it creates this terrible circle, this cycle that it's almost impossible to break out of. And so we decided at the greenhouse that we were going to put together the creative lab. And what we do is we audition actors and we take the top 10, and then we take samples from writers. We take the top 5, we put them in small groups with one another, and we say, okay, over the course of a month, you're going to get some professional mentoring. You're going to get some coaching. The writer is going to write 2 short films for the 2 actors that he or she is connected to. Over that month, they're refining it, they're performing it, and at the end of the month, they have to choose which of those 2 they want to do. And for each group, we end up shooting that short film. One, they get credit out of that, so they have something to put on their resume. They get footage that then they can show to agents and managers. They have the ability then to put together a demo reel, all the things that they need to move forward. And at the same time, they're refining their craft. We get the opportunity to speak into their lives, whether they're Christians or not. We just love them and try to help them become better actors and writers. And the end result is that they end up working together. They end up having the opportunity to share what they can do and bring to the table. It's a wonderful opportunity, and it's caused more gray hair than anything else in my life.
I bet.
Yeah.
How does one see these things?
A lot of times we keep them private, and the reason that we do that is some are better than others.
Yeah.
We view it as a teachable moment, if you want to call it that, where sometimes they get to the end and it's really challenged their acting abilities or their writing abilities, and we're able to sit down and say, hey, why didn't this work? Instead of, you have to create this masterpiece. Instead, we're like, you have the opportunity to fail. It's a safe place to fail. And at the end of it, it may not look good, but then we get the chance to come together and say, okay, let's examine this. What can we do better next time? And we feel like creatively, that's the healthiest environment for artists, a place where they can fail, which Hollywood doesn't have a whole lot of that. You know, Hollywood tends to be
Yeah,
like, you
you got
fail
one of
once
them
and you're
and
out.
you're out, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So to create that environment, and that's one of the reasons why we keep them kind of private. We allow, if the artists themselves want to put it out there, they certainly can. But we want to create an environment where they're not afraid that they'll never work in this town again because it didn't work. And for us, that's a marvelous opportunity for us to speak into their lives and give them a chance to grow creatively without feeling like they're one and out. You know, we don't want to have that for them.
Uh, let's just throw a hypothetical out there. I'm 78 years old, okay? And I've been on the stage most of my life. I mean, if I decided I wanted to come down there and break into Hollywood, what would I do?
First, you would check in with your spouse and your kids and elders at your church and make sure that you are not going insane. It's a difficult industry, whether you're young or old. It doesn't, you know, it's tough. And so I hear from people, because we do a lot of mentoring, people that come here from Iowa or wherever, and they're like, you know, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm supposed to be here, and I just have this passion for acting and passion for writing, whatever it may be. And we feel like half of our job is to just kind of gently examine that. What does it mean that your passion is for acting or your passion is for writing? I tell people, do you know where the word passion comes from? And they're always like, no, I have no idea. And I say, well, it comes from the Latin word passeo, which means to suffer, which means if you're passionate about acting or you're passionate about writing or you're passionate about filmmaking, you're willing to suffer in order to make that happen. That may mean that you have to take on 2 or 3 jobs just to make the ends meet while you're going about the beginning stages of your career as a professional artist. Are you willing to do that? And a lot of times they're not. They were called by the siren song of, you know, the lights and the red carpet and the,
Yeah.
you know, fancy ballroom gowns and stuff like that. And we just want to inject a little reality into it, that that's not the majority of what it means to be a creative professional. And so with that, some of them go home, and we feel like, you know what, that may be the best thing for you. It doesn't mean you stop being creative. Maybe you get to do community theater, or you get to do something at your church, or whatever it may be. Those who end up staying, then we try to steer them towards where their strengths really lie. Some of them come out here and they're like, I want to be an actor. And eventually we come to realize you're not an actor. You have other strengths, but that's not one of them. Let's find out what your real strengths are so you can do the thing that you were created to do. So we go through that process with people, always kind of lovingly and gently questioning, you know, okay, you have a dream. That's good. What else do you have that you bring to the table?
Yeah, I had my dad's best friend. This was back in the 50s. He loved to work on automobiles and loved to work on engines. And one day he took an engine apart, put it all back together again, and then he took a sledgehammer to it just to see if it would hold together. And that's the kind of thing you do. You
Yeah,
put a sledgehammer to it just to see
yeah,
if it's going to hold together. Um,
absolutely.
you're working with a couple of gentlemen with pretty broad backgrounds, Veggie Tales and
Mhm.
Aladdin and all that, and you're working on the Dead Sea Squirrels.
Yeah,
Tell me about that. Is that on TV now, or is that
it's
just something
not.
you're working on? Or
As of right now, we're closing in on a potential distribution deal on a streaming platform. And so we are currently on episode 10 of 13 for the first season. We plan for this to be multiple seasons. So we are just getting started with the process of creating episode 10. What I have seen from previous episodes, it's amazingly funny, the kind of thing that adults and kids are just going to love. And I don't think I'm overselling it. When I've seen it, it's laugh out loud funny. So I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Well, when you're working, collaborating with people, obviously these folks are good and you're good. Um, how do you guys decide who's going to do what and who's going to, how this thing's going to look in the end and all that?
It's different with every project. The Dead Sea Squirrels was written by a guy by the name of Mike Naraki, who is the voice to Larry the Cucumber with Veggie Tales. And he wrote these as children's books. So those are available, in stores and online. And between him and a gentleman by the name of Steve Taylor, who was the director of Blue Like Jazz, um, they got in touch with me and they said, would you come help with some of the business side, the strategic sides of this project? So a lot of times you're just looking for, okay, this is what we need. Who would be a good person for that? And I have I guess it's the blessing or the good fortune or whatever phrase you want to use for that to be able to do lots of different things. And so I get called in. Each project's a little different, in terms of what I get called in to do, which I enjoy. That keeps me on my toes.
I bet you do. Do you have any projects on your desk right now that you could tell us about or that
In
you'd like?
terms of film projects,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a wonderful time travel murder mystery that is either going to be in Pennsylvania or Atlanta, Georgia, depending on where the financing comes from. So that I'm the lead producer on that particular one, working with some wonderful young guys who are former students of mine in a class I taught on entertainment law. And we're really excited about that one coming together. A very, very smart script. I'm working on a script right now that it will be set in Kentucky, in a little town in Kentucky, hopefully to be shot next year. We just finished up, Steve Taylor and I just finished a film that's going through Sony. That's a nice romantic comedy set in Taiwan and Nashville. And let's see what else. There's a number of those. We've through the Greenhouse. We're about to release a new magazine, a quarterly print magazine for creative artists of all sorts. Called Creative Life. That the first issue is going to go out in a couple weeks here, and there's always something going on where we have so much talent at the Greenhouse alone. We've developed this pool of talent that we can reach out to and say, hey, we've got this project, come be part of this, and to us, that's a whole lot of fun because we've invested in these people from a creative standpoint, and to be able then to turn around and say, we believe in you as a creative, come be a part of this. To us, that's very fulfilling.
Well, I know that being working for God, who knows the end from the beginning and all this kind of thing. We're supposed to sit around and I won't say sit around, but we're to work and we're not to be anxious for anything, and we're just supposed to be very well anchored and move in the way God moves us. Are there parts of you that are anxious to do something that you haven't been able to do yet?
Yeah, the beauty of what I do is I have enough space that I can tackle different projects that I want to do. I'm in the middle of writing a novel right now,
Oh, are you?
and it's kind of a spy thriller. And so, yeah, I mean, there's always more, right? I mean, there's always that next project, and there are those artists who tend to rest on their laurels, and they do a couple projects and they're kind of done. That's not me. And part of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about creativity as worship. If creativity is worship, which I believe it is, and I think it's pretty clear from the Bible that it is, then you don't stop because you don't stop worshiping. That's what you're created to do. I hope to be creative until the day I die. I hope I'm working on something until my eyes and fingers can't handle it anymore. Even
Yeah,
then, I hope that
me
it's
too.
still a part of who I am. Is there always that next thing? Yeah. I would have liked to have been doing feature films, 20 years ago when I first got here, but I think that as human beings, God is always refining us. He's always like getting that one step at a time so that we're ready for the next work that he has for us. If I was doing feature films back then, probably wouldn't be very good at it. Now that those doors have been opening up over the last several years, I feel like, well, I'm learning something now that's going to be for the next big thing that's going to come along. I don't ever want to feel like I've just arrived. I want to keep growing as an artist.
Yeah, do you, right now, it sounds like people come to you with projects, or you develop a project that is kind of a pet of yours and you want to see it done. So you go someplace where you think someone is going to kind of work with you on it and so forth. Uh, is there any thought about, this is a stupid question. Is there any thought about some kind of a Christian streaming service that this stuff that we do, just ends up being shown, and maybe people like it, maybe they don't. I don't know. What's your
Yeah, I mean there are those platforms out there already, and like PureFlix is a example of that. And some people like that kind of content, other people don't as much. And so the beauty of what's happening in the entertainment industry right now is that distribution is being expanded. You can find the platform that has the content that you like, and you can subscribe to that, or if you don't like it, you can find something else. So and I know of other ones that are in the works right now. So yeah, they're out there. It's just a matter of finding them. Yeah.
And let's talk about Catalyst for a minute.
Sure.
This idea of writing and uh, do people just come to you? Do you find writers, or where does this happen? I mean,
Yeah.
how does this
Well, the
happen?
Catalyst Writers Group is about 2 years old. And what we were finding is that there's all these writers, not just screenwriters, but people who are writing novels, devotional books, etc.,
Yeah.
that they were operating kind of in a vacuum. Like they didn't have anybody to truly challenge them and review their work from a professional point of view. Now, I have limited time, just like most people, and so people are sending stuff to me. Hey, could you read this, and then provide notes? And they didn't realize that reading a script, just reading it, is a good 2-hour process, and
Yeah.
then providing notes is another 2 hours, and then sitting down with them and explaining those notes it becomes very heavy
Very
at that point.
extensive.
So what we decided to do is to put together a program, the Catalyst Writers Group, where writers were put into small groups with one another that were at the same basic level of experience, and then also doing the same type of writing. So, we have a small group for sitcom writers. We have a small group for novel writers. We have a small group for devotional writers, for feature-length films, etc. And within those groups, then they're providing notes to one another on the writing that's being done. And that helps them to then grow together. The entire group is run by a wonderful woman, has become a really good friend, Cheryl Anderson, who's a showrunner of Sweet Magnolias on Netflix. And she's just created this wonderful environment for writers to work together and to help one another from all over the world. So we have writers from Germany and Canada and Australia, etc. We're at about 70 writers in the group right now, and we anticipate that it's going to grow over time, and we think that's just great. So,
Yeah, I bet. Uh, is there anything about the industry that really kind of gets in your craw?
oh, we don't have enough time for all that, but
Tell me something.
uh,
I'd
anything
like to get
that sticks.
inside you a little bit.
Yeah, I would say this. I think one of the things that bugs me is that people lose the joy of creating. They become so insistent on their work doing something that, whether that's making change politically or making change socially or theologically, whatever that is, that they actually put the cart before the horse. They are so intent on changing the world around them that they lose the joy of just being creative. And, when we were kids, we didn't have problems, imagining things, playing with little toy cars or dolls or whatever it was that people played with, because creativity it was just a joy to do. It was innate in who we were. It was inherent in who we were created to be. And I think that people, when you get into the industry, it can become very like, well, I've got to accomplish this thing. I've got to change the world. And they just lose the joy of the artistry of creating. Now, I'm a huge proponent of changing the world, and I'm a huge proponent of the arts being one of the prime movers in doing that. But we can't make that just the end goal of changing the world. Some of the best movies out there are just fun, and you can tell they were having fun making them. Whether they're Christians or not, it's immaterial at a certain point. They were the enjoyment of being creative. And there's a reason why we enjoy being creative. And that reason is that we were created in the image of God, who is the prime creator. So when we are being creative, we are actually reflecting who he is back at him. And if we can just approach the arts from that perspective, whether in the industry or whether somebody's just an amateur, all of that is, we can just enjoy the process of being like our Father in creating.
Yeah, I always go back to the fact that creativity is the first attribute that God reveals. In the beginning, God created, and if we look at His creation, not only is it functional, but it's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And the deeper we go into it, the more incredible it becomes, which is, to me, I just am in awe of it.
Yeah.
I really am.
And I think God loves creative people. He loves artists. And unfortunately, a lot of artists have been burned by the church, and that to me is a heartbreak, because one, it shows that the church has not yet tapped into how much God loves artists. The very first person in the Bible who was recorded as being filled by the Holy Spirit was a guy named Bezalel, who, it says, God filled him with his spirit to do all these crazy artistic things. First person to be in the Bible who was said to have had that experience. And there's something about artists that God just loves, and as a result, I think that it's incumbent upon the church to figure out what that is and to begin to love artists too. I find it, I don't think it's a coincidence that so many artists here in LA have been burned by the church. I think that's something the enemy just loves to do, to separate the church from the artists and the artists from the church. And there's a need for both. The church needs artists. There's a prophetic voice that artists have. And if the church burns them and drives them away, they lose the benefit of that prophetic voice. Conversely, artists need the church. Artists need that community, that sense of spiritual growth that the church can provide. And I think the enemy loves to drive a wedge in between the two. And I think it's really important that the church begin to say, hey, we might have handled this wrong, and we need to figure out a way to not just bring artists in and tell them what to do, but to truly understand the heart of the artist, to understand the heart of the creative, so that we can incorporate that in a much bigger, more expansive way into what it means to be the church.
It sounds to me like you're quoting from your book. Is that
I'll do that
much
every
of
once
the
in a while.
story? Huh?
I'll do that every once in a while.
No, you should. This I got to get a copy of it. I mean, is it on Kindle or
It's
where
on
can I get it?
Amazon. Yeah, you can definitely get it from Amazon. So it's out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll get a copy because I got to read this thing. No, you're voicing exactly what I've said all along. You know, when you go to church, it's you do A, then B, then C, then D, and then you go home, and
Yeah.
you're supposed to work up your all this worship and all this sense of loving the Lord. And if you're someone whose brain is just always working on something, you see a young kid, and you just marvel at the excitement in that young kid, and there's
Yeah.
nowhere to put it. Unless you're going to go teach Sunday school, and then you're going to teach A, then B, then
Hmm.
C, then D, and
Yeah.
uh, I always thought it'd be fun sometime to have a church service for creative people, and just have a dancer up there, have a musician up there, have
Yeah.
somebody read some poetry, whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
and just let God work in that heart,
Yeah.
and then
And
work in all the hearts.
we're seeing churches do that now. There are churches
Are we?
definitely here in Los Angeles, but even back home, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I hear tell of some of the churches out there incorporating the arts into their worship service. I think, to me, that's a good sign, a sign that the church is beginning to understand that, one, they haven't entirely handled it correctly up till now, and two, that there's a much better way to include artists in this concept that we call worship.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've gone at this about an hour, and you're a busy guy, and God bless you. And
Oh, thank you.
is there anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
Well, the greenhouse is not just for people in the entertainment industry, professionals. It is also for the woman who is writing a book in the confines of her own home in Kansas, or somebody who is dreaming about being a professional filmmaker, or we want to invite artists from everywhere to be a part of this community. We have a small membership fee, but it provides like all sorts of benefits and stuff. We try to keep it very low. This is our opportunity to minister to artists. If you have listeners, or just people that that would be interested in this, they can find us at greenhouseproductions.com. We're happy to answer questions. This is our way of giving back. We love artists, and we want to create an environment where they feel loved and appreciated and valued. If there's anybody out there that needs that, as so many artists do, I hope they'll come find us, that they can be part of our larger community.
Well, you'll probably find me sleeping on your doorstep one day. Anyway, God bless you.
Yeah.
This has been really fun. You're fun to talk to. You obviously have a great heart for this business, and gosh, I'm just so excited to have a few minutes with you.
Yeah. Thank
You
you.
Anyway, God bless you, and all the best for the rest of the day and the rest of your life. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having the conversation. I look forward to talking again soon.
You betcha. And God bless
Okay.
you. Bye bye now.
Bye.
I'm a little under the weather today, so I'm just going to let you know about our next guest this way. First, she's a remarkable Christian woman who's put her talent for writing to work in spades. 125 books, over 5 million copies in print. She's been inducted into halls of fame and given many other industry awards. My goal for this series is to get creative Christian people to use the gifts God's given them to bring Him glory. You're not going to want to miss this next podcast, for the person we're meeting has done just that. God bless, and see you then.
Until next time, be a creative Christian.